This program is brought to you by the Reeves Law Firm, www.reevesfirm.com.
Good evening, everyone. In the know. Tony Reeves, Tony Reeves, Tony Reeves, Tony Reeves, fire. Following the news in any way, shape, or form. No shortage of things to talk about. What does it mean? What will it bring? Is this a reality we simply have to accept? Tony Reeves, fire. Tony Reeves. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Q&A Social Security Disability Today. I am your host, Attorney Anthony Reeves, and I'm going to be looking kind of crazy, so please bear with me. But I want to thank you for joining me again for another day of rocking and rolling accordingly. So let's go ahead and get this thing moving and grooving, shaking and baking, earth and quaking. Now, I want to do something a little different today. I've given a lot of tips over the last year. For most of you who followed me, I want to say thank you very much. I've done about a good 400 of these videos. I've had a lot of questions from you and a lot of great feedback. Some very colorful, some, of course, almost all of it helpful. I'm so glad that you guys have utilized my platform as an opportunity to discuss amongst each other issues that you have. I wanted to do something a little different. One of my clients actually had filled out their application. And for all the tips that I've given, I started to realize that in the grander scheme of things, I don't believe I've had the opportunity to really go through what it means when you're actually applying. Just to kind of give you some friendly tips along the way in terms of things you should think about. So let's talk about this for a second. You've made the decision to apply for disability. For whatever reason, whatever life's inadvertent, circumstances or whatever situation that has occurred that you just did not anticipate, your life is in a position where now you have to make the decision about whether or not you should apply for disability, so you've decided to do so. With the advent of the internet, you've probably done a lot of research, and let's be real, you're probably freaking out when you see all the things. You're probably going to listservs, you're going to Facebook groups, Snapchat, Instagram, whatever these groups that are out there, and you're probably realizing that you're very overwhelmed because of one or two things. One, there's a lot of information, and two, everybody keeps saying that this process takes a long time. So you almost feel like, okay, I don't know what the heck to do. Should I do this? You need to do it, but you kind of don't know, well, what things are going to cause these headaches to occur along the way. So let's go ahead and try a few of these things. And I want to go through an application just to give you, of course, I'm not going to show you the application, but I want to talk about some of the things that goes on when you apply that you need to be aware of so that hopefully you can make things go a little bit faster. Now, most of this is fairly straightforward, but what happens is that a lot of times people get to various portions of the process and they get a little confused. So let me see if I can help unconfuse you on some of these things. The application and identification is fairly straightforward. They want to know, what's your date of birth, gender, you're blind, no, disabled, yes. Now, when they ask you the start date of your disability, here's where you need to be mindful. When they're asking for the start date of your disability, they're asking for the date in which your medical condition prevented you from being able to work. Do not use that date as a day to go way back in time for when the medical conditions that you have first presented themselves. So you want to make sure that when you're sitting there, that you're telling them, this is the date that my medical condition rose to a certain level that it prevented me from being able to work. So that's the key. That's really, really, really the key question that they want to know. Is at what particular point did your situation get to the point where your disability prevented you from being able to work? So that's one thing. Then, of course, they're going to ask you contact information, can you read, things of that nature. They want to know if there's any other social security numbers, names out there. That's important. Birth and citizenship information. This is very important. If you're born in the United States, it's probably not an issue. If you are a foreign national, or maybe somebody who was born abroad, they're raised here, they're going to want to know that because they're going to want to make sure that you're eligible to be able to apply for disability. So that's very important. If that's something that you need to keep in the back of your mind. They're going to ask you if there's any marital information. Of course, they want to know if, who your spouse is, how old they are, things of that nature, just to see if there's a possibility that you might be entitled to some benefits tied to someone else's Social Security number. So you want to give them that information. Children, especially if they're under the age of 18, for certain Social Security disability programs, your children may be eligible to receive disability benefits on your earnings, depending on your circumstances. So they're going to want to know, do you have any minor children in the house? So keep that in the back of your mind as well. They want to know if there's any military information, any employers information, self-employment. All these things are important. Let me tell you why it's important. It's because when you're applying for disability benefits, you're telling the government, get a little closer here, you're telling the government that your medical condition is of such a level that you are unable to work. So guess what? If you allege that your medical condition disables you on 2011, but then you indicated that you worked in 2013, 2014, they're going to want to look at those earnings to see how much money you made. They're also going to want you to be able to explain to them why they shouldn't ignore those earnings if they're substantial. So you want to keep that in the back of your mind as well. Now, sometimes they'll ask you direct deposit information. The reason why they want that information is because Social Security is primarily electronic, so they would rather do a direct deposit into your bank account as opposed to sending you a paper check. So they want to get that information. Now, once you get all of the preliminary information taken care of, then you want to get down to the nitty-gritty, the disability information. Now, this is where you need to stop for a second when you're actually starting to apply and start rounding up the names, numbers, address of all the people who are treating you for the condition that you believe disable you. Because this is the information that they need to know. Then also, when you list, one of the first things they're going to ask you is tell us what your physical and mental conditions are. Keep in mind, you can list, most people do what I call the kitchen sink approach. They list everything. But I'm a big proponent of list the conditions that you believe you have medical support disables you. So what do you mean? Well, guess what? If you know that the reason why you're applying for disability is because of your back and your knee, but you're not disabled because of high blood pressure, why are you putting high blood pressure in there? You can put it in there. It may be affecting you and you may not know, but in the same instance, just be mindful. They want to know, they're not asking you to tell me every health condition you got. Well, I got a little allergy on my arm, I got a little sinus thing going on, I got a little high blood pressure. They want to know specifically, looking at your condition, what problems do you have, what medical impairments do you have, physical or mental, that keep you from working. So keep that back in mind. Now, they're going to want to know things like your height and your weight, things like that. They're going to want to know another point of contact, somebody who may be aware about your condition, who could talk, who's a third party, somebody who knows you, not some random joker, but somebody who actually knows you. Okay. Then getting down to the nitty gritty. Okay. Healthcare professionals. They're going to ask you things like specific, the name of the doctors, their office names, address, phone numbers. That's important. Why? Because they're going to be asking for those records. So it's really important that you don't, paraphrase and say the address is round the corner on 3rd Street. Trust me when I tell you, I've seen people who've done that. I tell them, why are you doing this? By doing that, you're making them work. And by making them work, that means they're adding time to the process because they have to figure out who this person is. Okay? When you're talking, if you don't remember the first time you've been to a doctor, call the doctor and ask them in your records, when was the first time I went there? And then when was the last time I went there? And how often do I go see? Now you're asking yourself, why is that relevant? Social Security is trying to establish, excuse me, got to get a little drink of water here. Wonderful. Social Security is trying to establish longitudinal care with your provider. Longitudinal care is a nice way of saying, how long have you been with that doctor? Because the reality is that they'd like to believe that a doctor that has a more intimate knowledge of your medical condition is probably going to be in the best position to be able to give an opinion about what you can and you can't do. So you want to be specific about the fact of who that doctor is, what conditions they're treating you for, and more importantly, what have they done for you? If you cannot remember, don't make it up. Call your doctors, get them to tell you, ask them to pull your chart and tell you. So then you're going to have to list all these doctors and be specific. They're going to want to know the first time. They're going to want to know the last time. They're going to know what treat. They're going to want to know what medical conditions you're being treated, and they're going to want to know what treatment you've received. Now, give them everybody. They're going to want to know what hospitals you've gone to. If you've gone to the hospital, that is very important because they're going to want to know what were you going to the hospital for. How long were you there? All of those specifics are important. Now, let me tell you, if you've been getting treatment for a condition for a long time, you've probably had a lot of different tests done. I don't want you to have to figure out what tests you've had done. What I want you to do is I want you to contact your providers and ask them. Because Social Security is going to ask you, what tests have you had done? When did you have them? And more importantly, who sent you for those tests? Because the reality is, if they can't get those tests from particular persons, they can always go to the doctor. Like, so let's say you got an MRI done at a place called, Reeves Imaging. Well, if they can't get the records from Reeves Imaging, if Dr. Johnson sent you to Reeves Imaging, they can get the records from Dr. Johnson. They would expect those records to be in Dr. Johnson's file. Okay? Now, medicines. People, you can never underestimate how powerful and important it is that you tell Social Security what medicines you've received. You want them to know what medications you're getting. I know a lot of times it's hard because especially if you're getting a laundry list of medications, but you want to make sure that you inform Social Security about the medications that you're taking. Look on the bottles. And it's important to remember, not medications that you're taking in the past. What are you taking now? Because it's easy, especially for persons when you got a lot of medical medications, to say, oh, I was taking this, I was taking this, I was taking this. No, not was. What are you taking now? Okay? Now, they're going to want to know about your education, if you've worked or anything, or if you're working now. They're going to want to know, looking at your circumstances, they're going to want to know what your job history is. This tends to get people. Social Security wants to know about the work that you've done in the last 15 years. And it can be part-time, it can be full-time, and it gets tricky because a lot of times, if you're a person who has hopped from job to job, you can never remember every one. But you want to be as detailed as you can. You want to tell them the type of job you've done. You want to tell them when you started, when you stopped. You want to tell them the hours of the day. All of this information is relative because remember, a part of the disability process is them determining whether you can do anything that you used to do or whether you can do anything else. Okay? They want to know about your education. Why is your education important? Your education is important because part of the disability process when they're looking at whether you can do anything you used to do is they look at how old you are, they look at your education, they look at your background, work background, as well as the limitations from your impairments. Then if there's anything you overlooked, provide it in the comment section. Now, I will tell you this, and I know we've been on here for about a good 12, 13 minutes here. I could probably summarize the whole initial portion of the application like this. You're going to need to tell them about the work you've done in the past. You need to tell them about the doctors you've been to see and the treatment that you've received. If you don't know that information readily, get it together. Do you need to get it together before you apply? Not necessarily. However, if you want to help make things move a little faster, the more information you give to Social Security, the better. If you have to make them search or make them figure it out, that adds time to the process. You don't want to add time to the process. You want them to make an informed decision. You want to make sure that you've told your doctors that you've applied. You want to make sure that when you fill the application online, that you go and you download that release and send it to Social Security as soon as possible. When you provide them the name of a third party, you want to be specific. Okay? You want to be specific in terms of letting them know a person who can really talk about your condition. I know I'm probably being a little anal about these little things, but you'd be surprised how many times people, and this is throughout the disability process, when they fill out forms, they tend to take shortcuts. Either one, because they're overwhelmed by the situation, or two, because they're frustrated because they don't feel like they should have to fill out all of this. The reality is you have the burden of proving you're disabled. So you want to provide as much information as possible so that Social Security does not have to figure out your circumstances. You do not want the government having to figure out if you're disabled or not. You need to take every definitive step possible to make it hard for them to deny you and make it easier for them to approve you. You don't want them to have to fill in the blanks. If you don't believe you can do it by yourself, there's a lot of great representatives out there that's more than willing to help hold your hand and walk you through the disability process so that you don't feel like you're going through this alone. But if you're doing this alone, be diligent, be detailed, and be upfront, because the more information they have, the less they have to fill in the blanks. And the less they have to fill in the blanks, the better opportunity you have a control over in terms of making sure you satisfy your burden of demonstrating that you're disabled. So when you file that initial application, make sure you get all this information together. So this way, when you give it to them up front, you can give them everything they need, and they don't have to figure out or find what they need in order to process your application.